Good evening. My name is Kevyn Creech, and I am your moderator for this evening, as well as the chair of Wake County Democratic Party. We are so happy to have you with us this evening. Before we go much further, I would like to thank all of you for being here on behalf of our hosts, Durham, Harnett, Johnston, and Wake counties. Welcome to the primary U.S. Senate Candidate Forum. We will open this forum with some welcoming words from 2nd Congressional District Congresswoman Deborah Ross.
Well, hello, Democrats from Wake, Johnston, Harnett, and Durham counties. What an exciting evening. I'm Congresswoman Deborah Ross. I represent the 2nd Congressional District, which is in Wake County. But I'm so excited that all of you have come together to sponsor this forum to hear from the Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate. I know it's going to be an exciting evening. There's so much talent in our party and so much diversity, and you're going to get to experience that. I would say that the most important thing to remember during this forum, during the primary, and particularly after the primary, is that we are all on the same team. And we have got to come together after the primary and make sure that we elect a Democrat to the U.S. Senate. I'm sure you have seen how closely divided the Senate is and how the Republicans are obstructing all of the things that are near and dear to our hearts. They do not have the same values we do. And if we can add a Democrat from North Carolina, it will make an enormous difference. I'm excited that you're going to get educated. I'm excited that you're going to get fired up to work in the 2022 election. And I'm excited about what we'll be able to do together to take this Senate seat back. I hope you enjoy the evening. I hope all of the candidates do well. Cannot wait to have a Democratic colleague on the Senate side. Have a wonderful event.
Before moving on to candidate biographies and quick greetings, thanks to all of the volunteers from all 4 hosting counties who put this together. Also, thank you to the 5 sponsors who supported this webinar: the African American Caucus of WCDP, East Wake Democrats Club, Progressive Democrats of Wake County, Wake Democratic Men's Club, and Wake County Senior Democrats. Further, thanks to all of you who are attending this evening to learn about these candidates. And finally, thank you to the 6 candidates and their campaigns for participating in this important event. Next, we will move to the candidate biographies presented by Bob Robinson of Wake County. Each candidate will have 15 seconds following the reading to say a quick hello. Again, candidates, that's 15 seconds. After the candidate greetings, I will provide some housekeeping prior to the question and answer portion. Bob, you are up.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the first slide, please? Chief Justice Cheri Beasley. Cheri Beasley served as a public defender in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and began a distinguished judicial career in 1999 when she was elected as a district court judge. In 2008, she won statewide with a seat on the North Carolina Court of Appeals and was elected statewide again as an Associate Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court in 2012. In 2019, Cheri Beasley made history as the first African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice. According to Chief Justice Beasley's website, she has seen how Washington only responds to the well-connected, whether on healthcare, education, or the ability to find work that supports a family and retire with dignity. She's running for Senate to fight for all North Carolinians. Chief Justice Beasley is married to Kurt and the mother of twin sons, Thomas and Matthew. Justice Beasley, please take about 15 seconds to greet our audience.
Hello, Harnett, Durham, Johnston, and Wake counties. I am so excited to be here this evening. I am Cheri Beasley. I'm a wife, a mom, and a former judge and the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina. I am running for the Senate to build a better future.
Time. Thank you, Cheri.
Thanks.
Senator Jeff Jackson. Jeff Jackson was first elected in 2014. He is serving his fourth term in the North Carolina Senate, representing District 37, located in Mecklenburg County. He earned an undergrad degree from Emory University and graduated from UNC School of Law in 2009. He served as an assistant district attorney in Gaston County following law school. Senator Jackson is an Army veteran, served in Afghanistan, and is currently a captain in the Army National Guard. He originally enlisted following the 9/11 attacks and has served for 18 years. He and his wife, Marissa, are the parents of 3 children. According to his website, he helped lead the fight against gerrymandering, stood against discriminatory legislation like HB2, supported investments in early childhood education, repeatedly called for raising teacher pay and expanding Medicaid, and passed reforms to our criminal justice system. Senator Jackson, please take about 15 seconds to greet our audience.
I appreciate that. Can't do much in 15 seconds. So good to see y'all, everybody. Looking forward to this. See y'all again in a few minutes.
Dr. Thomas LaGrone. Dr. Thomas LaGrone is a son, sibling, husband, and father. He leans on his faith and the country common sense wisdom learned from his parents and grandparents growing up on their farm. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science and is designated as a King's Scholar, having completed his master's thesis on the theological political thought of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He holds doctorate degrees in the field of pastoral counseling and congregation soul care, and owns a private practice as a psychotherapist specializing in addiction psychotherapy and pastoral counseling. Dr. LaGrone has over 34 years of servant leadership experience as a small business owner and senior pastor. He currently serves as board chair of the Welfare Reform Liaison Project, Guilford County's community action agency that provides free job training and social economic support for those moving from welfare to work. Dr. LaGrone, please take 15 seconds to greet our audience.
Hello, Democrats. I am Dr. Tobias LaGrone, and I look forward to earning your trust and support tonight. Thank you.
Mayor Rett Newton. Everett Rett Newton is from the coastal town of Beaufort, North Carolina. He attended Campbell University on a basketball scholarship and earned a degree in mathematics. He later earned another bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from American Military University and is currently working on a PhD in marine science and conservation from Duke. Following graduation from Campbell, Mayor Newton joined the Air Force, retiring as a colonel after 28 years of service. He commanded a squadron of F-15 fighters during the 9/11 attack, which flew combat missions over the Capitol. In 2017, he was elected mayor of Beaufort and has been active in environmental cleanups, preserving coastal communities from the effects of climate change. According to a Raleigh News and Observer interview, Mayor Newton was motivated to enter the Senate race by the January 6th insurrection, saying, "I am in this race because our democracy is under attack, and certainly the Trump family and Trump supporters are part of the attack on our democracy. Mayor Newton.
Thank you for letting me join you this evening. I've got strong ties to all 4 of these counties, so I look forward to the discussion this evening. Again, thank you.
Senator Erica Smith. Erica Smith was born at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville and raised in Northampton County. She spent summers working on her family's farm, dreaming about one day having a job that was inside with air conditioning. Senator Smith earned a scholarship to North Carolina A&T University, receiving a bachelor's degree in mathematical engineering. She also earned a master's degree in religious studies from Howard University. Senator Smith witnessed and experienced deep inequities in both her education and early work career. As an intern at Boeing, she fought for a standardized pay scale for engineering students, regardless of their gender or skin color. Senator Smith's experiences with inequities motivated her to run for office. She represented District 3 in rural northeastern North Carolina as a state senator from 2015 to 2021, where she fought corporations dumping PCBs in rural Warren County and payday lenders grifting working people. According to her website, this mother of 4 believes North Carolinians deserve a senator who works for us, not massive corporations and CEOs. Senator Smith.
Thank you. Good evening, Democrats. So excited to be here. And I tell you, all 6 of us are better than anyone that the Republicans will put up. Thank you for having us. Glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Dr. Richard L. Watkins. Richard L. Watkins is a scientist affiliated with the University of North Carolina and founder and CEO of SPAN, the nonprofit Science Policy Action Network. He was raised in Greensboro and earned a bachelor's degree in sociology from Fayetteville State University, where he also played varsity football. In 2014, Dr. Watkins earned a doctorate from UNC in microbiology. Dr. Watkins coordinates the Chancellor Science Scholar Program at UNC and also serves on the Campus and Community Advisory Committee. His early research at UNC focused on factors that influence disease progression towards AIDS in HIV-infected patients. Both his research and service at UNC is reflected in his motivation to run for U.S. Senate. According to his website, he entered the race to protect the future of North Carolinians by providing and improving health, safety, opportunity, and equity. Dr. Watkins.
Yes, my campaign is about you, safety, health, opportunity, equity solutions. I'm Dr. Richard Watkins, candidate for United States Senate. Good evening, y'all.
Thank you so much, Bob. All right, we're going to take a moment to go over some housekeeping so that we are all on the same page and understand the rules. First of all, tonight's event is not a debate. It is a forum. Again, it is not a debate. It is a forum. We have developed 5 questions for each candidate to answer. The first 4 questions were generated from topics chosen by stakeholders. The topics reflect our North Carolina Democratic Party platform planks. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer these. The 5th question is a more open-ended question. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer this. The candidates were provided possible topics. They were not provided the questions. Our timekeeper is Rebecca Brock of Harnett County. She is the Democratic Party chair there. She will provide a 10-second verbal warning as time is running out. Once time runs out, she will provide both a chime and say time or time's up. Candidates may complete their sentence, but after 10 seconds post the end of their time, candidates will be muted in order to provide equality among the candidates and keep to a strict time schedule this evening. The order of candidates was determined by a randomized process. The candidate answering first in the first round of questions will then go last during the 2-minute closing statements. The order will be announced at the beginning of each question section. It will be round robin. We have 5 question askers from various hosting parties. Each will share the question topic, provide the order of candidates, and read the full query with the background information once, then read the query nugget a second time. After that, that information will be dropped into the chat. Should a candidate need a question nugget reread, they may certainly ask for that to be done. As the moderator, I will manage transitions between the questions. So we will begin now with Raleigh Vice Chair Shanika Pender, who will announce the order, the topic, and read the question. Shanika.
Good evening, and thank you, candidates, for joining us. Our first topic of the evening is fair and open elections. The order, we will start with Mayor Rett Newton, followed by Dr. Richard L. Watkins, Dr. Tobias LaGrone, Senator Erica Smith, Chief Justice Cheri Beasley, and we will end with Senator Jeff Jackson. Over the past year, we've seen voting rights chiseled away by several state legislatures across the nation. Federal action to ensure free and fair elections is not just of paramount importance, it is also particularly urgent. It will take significant time for the protections within the legislation to be implemented across the country. Meaningful legislation passed by the House of Representatives earlier this year is currently stalled by the US Senate by the filibuster. From your perspective, is there anything missing in the currently proposed federal voting rights legislation? And if you were currently in the US Senate, how would you work to get that legislation passed? And I'll repeat, from your perspective, is there anything missing from the currently proposed federal voting rights legislation? And if you were currently in the US Senate, how would you work to get that legislation passed? Reminder, there's 2 minutes, and we'll start with Mayor Rett Newton.
Thank you for that question. First of all, your vote matters. Elections matter. Leadership matters. Just imagine if Warnock or Ossoff had not been elected. Just imagine if President Biden had not been elected. Just imagine if Governor Cooper, Elaine Marshall, and Josh Stein had not been elected. We would be seeing the same voter suppression laws as you see in Georgia, as you see in Texas, as you see in Arizona. And certainly Joe Manchin has his share of limitations, but he actually has come across a really good compromise to reduce the potential for voter suppression. He also, in his bill, his proposed compromise, he also has the ability to have an independent commission for redistricting, and also that bill includes provisions to reduce the impact of big money in Congress and for these elections. I think the key thing that you may be asking here is, what about the filibuster? I don't take large swings, so I do feel like, if necessary, we need to have carve-outs for certain items. Voting rights is a foundational element of our democracy. If we can't get to a compromise to get to a filibuster-proof bill, then we need to carve out and protect our voting rights. Thank you very much for that question.
Great, thanks. Dr. Richard L. Watkins.
Thank you very much. That is an excellent question. It is the foundation of our nation. Without it, we have taxation without representation. I would like to start with saying that getting rid of the filibuster is important if it means we are able to protect the right to vote of so many Americans. I support both the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act in their unwatered down forms. We cannot compromise when it comes to protecting the right to vote. There's no negotiation when it comes to protecting the right to vote. And you asked the question, what is something that is left out? I think something that is left out, a glaring weakness, I believe that's DC statehood. I think that is very, very important. We have a lot of people who are paying taxes that live in DC, but don't have appropriate representation. That is very important, that every American has a voice in this here democracy. And so I say that it's okay to get rid of the filibuster if it means protecting voting rights, DC statehood, and there are few things that are more important in this country than the right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. LaGrone?
Thank you for that question. Listen, we live in a day and time where we must take big swings. I have been voting Democrat since I was 18 years old. I walked to the post office a mile and a half from my grandmother's house, registered for the Selective Service, then registered to vote. What I noticed about the Republicans, when Republicans come into office, they swing big for tax cuts for the wealthy. They swing big in terms of voter suppression. And we need a Democrat who's willing to go to DC and swing big for working class people. At the end of the day, let me tell you what this is about. Will America accept a form of apartheid? Will America regress back to the old segregational ways by which they are fearful of the minority becoming the majority? Will America become bold and say, let's get rid of the filibuster? Because the filibuster is there as a safeguard and backdrop for privileged white males to continue to maintain power, even though the demographic shift is happening. I'm not here to miss words nor play games. America is hurting. People are hurting. North Carolina is hurting. And we deserve the right to vote. We need voter protections, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act must pass. And the filibuster, yes, possibly some carve-outs, but at the end of the day, the Democrats cannot afford to play softball when the Republicans are playing hardball. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Smith?
Thank you for the question. As we look at the threats on the right to the ballot box, we know that Republicans are making it harder for us to show up to vote, harder for us to get a ballot, and harder for that ballot to be counted. First and foremost, we needed to have passed in both chambers the For the People Act, which had three provisions. Those three provisions included election integrity, but also it addressed redistricting. We know that in North Carolina, we are one of the worst states for redistricting. By registration, we are a purple state. We should have more Democrats in the congressional delegation. And the only reason that Republicans are having control of the North Carolina House and the North Carolina Senate is because they have rigged the district. So in the For the People Act, the other component was public financing. The only way we're going to take big money out of politics is to make sure that we end Citizens United and provide access to regular everyday people and citizens being able to serve through public financing. As well, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act was critical in terms of restoring what was lost in Shelby v. Holder, understanding the importance of pre-clearance, which helps with when we're addressing the new districts that are going to be drawn after every census. We're going through it right now. So number one, I am for passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but also passing the For the People Act. We cannot continue to negotiate against ourselves. I believe that the Freedom to Vote Act, which was recently submitted this week, it is a watered down version. It does not expand voter protections, which are necessary. We know that it's under attack in every legislature across this nation. And so we have to understand 15 days is not enough, and we need to have early voting and rights to the ballot. Thank you.
Wonderful. Next, we have Chief Justice Cheri Beasley.
We know that in 48 states across this nation, including North Carolina, we have seen a wave of anti-voter legislation being passed aimed at making it harder to vote. That is absolutely un-American. We even saw last week voter ID legislation right here in North Carolina struck down, intended to make it harder to vote. It was 56 years ago that the Voting Rights Act was passed, and it was the act that allowed my mother, the late Beasley, access to the vote. And we're still fighting to secure this fundamental right. And I don't want my sons and your sons and children and grandchildren to still be fighting this fight when they're my age. This is about protecting our democracy. Protecting this fundamental right should be bipartisan, and Congress must take action. And that means passing the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And that will help protect the right to vote, including through expanding ways and opportunities to vote, and improving transparency in campaign finance, and helping to ensure fair redistricting maps. And I certainly know a lot about that because those have come before the Supreme Court. We need to get this right. I hope they will have passed this legislation by the time I'm in the Senate, but this is part of why I'm running. We must secure the right to vote. It is a fundamental right, and we need more senators who will work to protect this fundamental right. And that's what I pledge to do if you elect me to the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you. And rounding out answers for this question is Senator Jeff Jackson.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So the question was specifically about the currently proposed voting rights legislation. I take that to mean the Freedom to Vote Act, which is supported by Senator Klobuchar and Senator Manchin. It is less expansive than H.R. 1, the For the People Act. It's a bid to attract Republican votes in order to try and get past the filibuster, get something done. And it does do some good things. It requires paper ballots. That's good. It helps local authorities purchase election equipment. That's good. It requires that candidates report any foreign interference or attempt by a foreign country to coordinate with their campaign. And that's good. It doesn't end gerrymandering, but it does put in place new judicial safeguards for that. And that's good. It does not include the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and that's bad. It should include that. I think it should also go strong. It should go further with respect to ending gerrymandering. But it's not going to pass for the same reasons that H.R. 1 isn't going to pass. We all want these bills to pass. They're not going to pass because of the filibuster, folks. And if you're willing to defend the filibuster, then you're willing to watch efforts to actually secure your right to vote, which is fundamental. You're willing to watch those efforts fail. And I'm not willing to do that. I think we're going to have this conversation a lot with respect to healthcare, with respect to criminal justice. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, are you willing to side with democracy, or are you willing to side with an arcane piece of procedure, which is being used to facilitate gridlock and is not being used to facilitate bipartisanship? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Turning things back over to our moderator.
Yes, very well. So thank you so much, candidates. That was wonderful. We will now move on to the next question. Our questioner is Bill Crocker. He is a member of the Johnston County Democratic Party. Bill will read the question topic to you. He will remind you of what the order will be, and then he will read the question itself. Bill.
Hi, candidates. Our next topic is on the environment, and the order will be Senator Jackson, Mayor Newton, Dr. Watkins, Dr. LaGrone, Senator Smith, and Chief Justice Beasley. According to two 2019-2020 Pew Research surveys, more Americans say protecting the environment and dealing with climate change should be top priorities for Congress. Compared to a decade ago, over 2/3 of U.S. adults now say that the federal government is doing too little to reduce the efforts of climate change. Further, a recent release of information shows that July 2021 was the hottest month on record. What specifically should be done at the federal level to protect our environment, and how would you win over votes first in the general election and then also in the U.S. Senate to make real progress on mitigating the effects of climate change. And that question again, what specifically should be done at the federal level to protect our environment? And how would you win over votes first in the general election and then also in the U.S. Senate to make real progress on mitigating the effects of climate change? First to Senator Jackson.
Both those questions are great. Tackling climate is two big things. One, it's decarbonizing the sources of electricity. And two, it's electrifying as much of the economy as we can. And that second piece, there's some bipartisanship there because electrifying the economy involves doing things like more charging stations and more electric vehicles. And you can get both parties on board with some of that. But the first piece, which is about decarbonizing the sources of electricity, that is very partisan because on this issue, the Republican Party is simply a wholly owned subsidiary of the fossil fuel company. Look, we have 6 coal-fired power plants in North Carolina. How many do we need to have? We need to have 0, and we have to get there as quickly as possible. One specific proposal for doing that is to adopt something called the Clean Energy Standard. We have a version of it already in North Carolina. It says we have to have a percentage of our total produced by renewables every year, but it caps out at 12.5%. And coincidentally, we hit that cap this year. Well, 12.5% isn't enough. It needs to be 100, as 30 other states have already done. And as far as earning votes in this area, y'all, we need to do a better job as Democrats of enlisting the agriculture community as allies in this. There are lots of farmers who are on board. They've been hit by 2 500-year hurricanes in the last 3 years. You're not going to find climate deniers, particularly in the eastern part of the state. I know because we just did a whole bunch of town halls out there. But we do have to talk to them about making it financially feasible for them to transition to more sustainable practices with respect to climate, particularly.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Over to you, Mayor Newton.
Okay, thank you. You've actually asked 2 separate questions. You talked about environment and you've talked about climate. And yes, there is overlap between those two. But clearly, as far as cleaning up the environment here locally, we have had a massive cleanup of our waterways after Hurricane Florence, 120,000 pounds of marine debris, 11 derelict vessels, 34 illegal moorings, a bunch of car tires as well. And we're fixing infrastructure to reduce the number of toxins that are going into our waterways. This infrastructure has been neglected for decades, and we're fixing it. So from the environmental standpoint, yes, I've got a record of success in cleaning up our environment. Now that's the waterways. Let's talk about water and toxins there as well. As part of my PhD effort, we are mapping toxins in our waterways and trying to determine the sources. But also as part of this PhD effort, we need to look at some of the other substances that are going into our waterway, like PFAS. We've heard about that in the Cape Fear River. These are the forever chemicals, the Haw River, the Neuse River. We need to be able to measure those. We need to be able to mitigate those sources of environmental toxins. So let's talk a little bit more about climate now. As a scientist, I understand what's driving climate change. As a mayor of a coastal community, we've had to prepare and respond to climate change. And I will tell you, especially after the release of the UN report, this is urgent. We have to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels. North Carolina is already number 2 in the nation right now in solar. That's great. If you've been in the northeast part of the state, you also see the wind turbines that are out there, and we can certainly take advantage of more wind energy off of our coast as well. So we need to incentivize getting away from these fossil fuels and getting into a green economy. And I've been very pleasantly surprised. There is a very robust green economy that exists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Newton. Dr. Watkins, it's your turn.
Thank you. The question is about climate change, but let's set the record straight right here and right now. It's a climate crisis, not climate change, climate crisis. It's one of 2 existential threats that threaten human existence. I was in Haywood County, where they experienced a once in 100-year flooding, 20 feet above flood level. Within 4 hours, people were swept off their front porches. My campaign, we rolled up our sleeves and we got to work, sobbing right in our chest. We felt the pain and anguish of communities. This is not a game. It's one of the most serious threats that we face, and we have to address it head on. This is what we have to do: electrify everything. make sure that electricity comes from renewable resources. Next, we have to remove carbon from the atmosphere, investing in carbon capture technologies. But the best carbon capture technology that we have are trees. We must plant trees and prevent deforestation. It is our hope, but it is in our hands. Trust me, the future hangs in the balance. And yes, addressing this means our survival, but it also means jobs, 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 and more jobs. So we have an opportunity here to save the future and to create jobs. Anybody not saying climate crisis, don't take them seriously. It is my #1 priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Watkins. Dr. LaGrone, over to you.
Please repeat the question for me. Please repeat the question, please.
Certainly. So the question, apologize. What specifically should be done at the federal level to protect our environment, and how would you win over votes first in the general election and then also in the U.S. Senate to make real progress on mitigating the effects of climate change?
We begin by telling people the truth. Sometimes we do not tell people the truth because we don't want to affect the stock market. We don't want to cause mass panic. But the reality is that many communities have been having 100-year storms every 2 years. We need to make the shift to renewable energy. By making the shift to renewables and entering into models like they have in Germany with carbon capture. Germany is shifting to a model by which all the buildings within the country of Germany, there's a plan in place by which to put carbon capture mechanisms on buildings to pull out the negative impact in our environment. The next thing, shifting our mindset to job creation. By insulating homes, by adding solar power to homes, weatherization, green jobs, that can create billion-dollar worth of jobs within the state of North Carolina. As a clergy person, I believe that the earth is the Lord, the fullness thereof, that the earth has been given to us by God, and we're supposed to be faithful stewards. And it is embarrassing in our society that the very industries who have created billionaires by polluting our society, those same billionaires are playing in space and even going out to deserts and building mega cities and insulating themselves from the negative impacts that climate change is bringing. I think most recently, Bill Gates is building a billionaire city along with Jeff Bezos. So we as a public must open our eyes, open our ears.
Dr. LaGrone.
Thank you, and be collective in tackling this issue.
Thank you, Dr. LaGrone. Over to Senator Smith.
Thank you for the question. And just like the similar question, the climate crisis, and yes, Dr. Watkins is correct, this is a climate crisis. And similar to voting, protecting voting rights, we have to take bold action that's big enough to meet the crisis that we're facing. That's ending the filibuster and fighting to address climate change with a bold plan. For me, that bold plan is a Green New Deal. With a Green New Deal, we not only create the energy system of the future that is sustainable, but we also create millions of good paying jobs like Dr. LaGrone just shared. In addressing the climate crisis that we're in, this existential threat, you want to know, and the question asked, what will you do in the U.S. Senate? Well, first of all, I will be that 51st vote. We have Senator Joe Manchin, who is a literal coal baron, who is blocking bold climate action. We need that 51st vote in the U.S. Senate, and I will be that vote. A good indication of what somebody will do do is to look at what they have done. As a 3-term North Carolina State Senator, I have earned every environmental champion award by the industry. I was a Rising Star Green Tie Award recipient by the League of Conservation Voters, Senator of the Year by the League of Conservation Voters, Senator of the Year by the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. And I earned that distinction because I have been working for more than 2 decades in the state of North Carolina, taking on corporate polluters, holding people responsible for the coal ash dumping that too often occurs in minority communities and poor communities. I was with DC. I was in Washington, DC earlier.
10 seconds, Senator Smith.
With the Sunrise Movement demanding bold climate action that meets this moment. It's an opportunity to create jobs. For me, the answer to your question is the Green New Deal, and that's why I'm fighting for it.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Over to Chief Justice Beasley.
Thank you, Bill. Climate change is real. And we're facing a crisis that demands so much more action than what we've seen from politicians in Washington. All of us in North Carolina understand about climate change because all of us are living it. And the consequences of our inaction on climate change continue to hurt the people of our state and our nation, from longer and more damaging hurricane seasons to wildfires raging in the West. And it's not just something that's happening on the coast, it's happening in the mountains and all over our state. We know it's really important to be thinking about agricultural communities. I was speaking with a young man, Nate, just a couple weeks ago, whose family farm had severe damage due to Tropical Storm Fred. And we've seen damage to our military bases and businesses across the state. We've just got to act. We must invest in climate resilient infrastructure and expand renewable energy, which will grow many good paying jobs across our state. I certainly support President Biden's agenda to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030, and we just don't have time to waste. And this isn't just about us. It's about the world we want our children and their children and future generations to live in. There is a critical piece of this that we absolutely must acknowledge, and we must be fighting for environmental justice, whether it's lack of clean water or coal ash in our communities. And that environmental justice fight also started right here in North Carolina. If you elect me to the Senate, I'll fight for policies that ensure fair treatment for all people.
10 seconds, Chief Justice Beasley.
That have been disproportionately impacted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Beasley, and thank you all the candidates. Over to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you to our candidates. Up next, we will move on to question 3. Sheila Whittington, who is the 3rd Vice Chair of the Johnston County Democratic Party, will share the topic, share the order of candidates, and read the question. Again, this will be a 2-minute question. Sheila, over to you.
Thank you, and welcome, candidates. This next topic is healthcare, the access, affordability, equity, and reproductive freedom. The order will be Chief Justice Beasley, Senator Jackson, Mayor Newton, Dr. Watkins, Dr. LaGrone, and Senator Smith. According to the most recent census data, 8.5% of Americans, or 27.5 million people, do not have health insurance, disproportionately affecting Black and Brown Americans. Twice as many Americans were uninsured before the passing of the Affordable Care Act, yet the GOP platform still labels the ACA a disaster and calls for it to be repeated. Conversely, our party supports building on the progress we've seen over the last decade, but there are some important differences in how each of you propose we do so. In what specific ways do we continue expanding healthcare access, affordability, and equity for all Americans, including reproductive health care? How would you work to advance the policy positions you seek? Again, the question: in what specific ways do we continue expanding healthcare access, affordability, and equity for all Americans, including reproductive health care? How would you work to advance the policy positions you seek? Chief Justice Beasley.
The reality is everyone should have access to quality and affordable health care. I can tell you that shortly after our twin sons were born, we learned that they would need some surgery and a lot of medical care and treatment to make sure that they would be okay. And as a parent, when you get that kind of news, you want to make medical decisions not based on what the cost might be, but based on what the doctor says. And you want to be with your babies. You don't want to be on the phone haggling with insurance companies and trying to make sure that they get the coverage that they need. But we knew, even in our frustration, we knew how lucky we were that our sons were receiving the care that they needed. But luck should determine if you can see a doctor and receive high quality care. I know that parents, all of us, will go to any lengths to make sure that our children have access to the care that they need, but it just shouldn't be that hard. What we know is that in Mitchell County, women are driving an hour and a half down the mountain to give birth. That's absolutely unacceptable. We can and must do better. We can lower healthcare costs, expand the Affordable Care Act, implement a public option, and protect coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. And it shouldn't matter whether you live in Chapel Hill or Cherokee or Edgecombe County. We know so many of our counties across the state are really struggling for good health care. Expansion of Medicaid will go a long way in helping rural communities. Reproductive health is health care, and we've got to make sure that women are covered, and we absolutely cannot have the abomination that we saw in Texas. We must codify Roe v. Wade.
10 seconds.
If we don't, we put lives in danger. We must do this. We must act responsibly.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Senator Jackson.
I'm trying to turn on my video. It says that the host won't let me. Oh, there we go. Y'all changed the settings. Great. Hold on. Let me hit the button. Okay. I'm going to address reproductive rights first. We have to codify Roe versus Wade. That's essential. Again, with respect to the filibuster, probably not going to happen with the filibuster intact. Look, with respect to healthcare, we need universal healthcare. Healthcare is a right. There are 36 or 38 developed nations on earth, depending on who's counting. There's one that has no version of universal healthcare, and it's ours. And we just did a town hall in every single county in the state. We did 100 town halls, and we heard personal stories about healthcare in the vast majority of them. And it's people suffering from the fact that we are the only developed nation without universal healthcare. What I believe is that the goal should be universal healthcare by 2024, that we should approach this with a real sense of urgency. Why? Because we don't know who the president's going to be in 2025. God help us. We don't know. So we should have a game plan here for getting to universal by 2024. I think the way that you do that is a few key pieces. You put Medicare or a version of Medicare on the exchange so that anybody who wants to use it as their insurer can do that. You lower the eligibility age for Medicare. There's good prescription drug legislation that might actually pass before any of us have the opportunity to get elected. And then there's Medicaid expansion. And again, there's some federal legislation that could help with finally making sure the non-expansion states take that step. One thing that would be particularly helpful with that in North Carolina, look, y'all, as we've traveled the state, we've gained an appreciation for how many rural hospitals are really on the brink. And this is a part of healthcare. It's making sure that people, no matter where they live, have access to it. We got 19 rural hospitals in severe financial straits. The 5 most in-danger hospitals in the country are all in our state. Why? Because we have the nation's 2nd largest rural population.
10 seconds.
When we didn't expand Medicaid, it just hit us that much harder. We can absolutely do this. We should approach it with a sense of urgency.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Mayor Newton.
Thank you. A lot to unpack here, Sheila. First of all, let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla, which is the pandemic. We should have been done with this pandemic last summer. If there had been any shred of national leadership whatsoever, we would have been done. But unfortunately, we find ourselves still dealing with the 4th wave of this pandemic. And just last week, I was in Johnston County at the Board of Education meeting where Republicans had rallied to try to intimidate the Board of Education into getting away from a mask mandate, to include Madison Cawthorn showing up as well. Unfortunately, the Board of Education had the fortitude to maintain their mask mandate. So let's talk a little bit more about it as we go across the state. A lot of the things that you hear is affordable health care. You hear about concerns about mental health capacity. You hear concerns about substance abuse treatment or lack thereof. And the infrastructure bill, you had hard infrastructure, and the previous editions also had that soft infrastructure that dealt with the mental health and the substance abuse as well. We need to get back to there. And let's not be naive to think that the insurance companies are just going to go away, but that should not dissuade us from getting health care for all. And I will challenge the other candidates. Let's get Medicaid expansion across the goal line. The American Rescue Plan has lifted more of the burden off of the states. This positively affects over 500,000 North Carolinians with billions of dollars of economic development and thousands of jobs. So let's work together. Let's pull all 100 counties together and let's get Medicaid expansion across the goal line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Newton. Dr. Watkins, you're up next.
Thank you very much. As a virologist, a scientist that studies viruses, this pandemic could be under control, but we are in difficult times. We have the most deaths out of any country in the world, but we don't have the largest population. We need to get things together. We need new leadership. I will also say this: reproductive health is health, and everyone has a right to health. It's not a privilege, it's a right, which means by its very definition, it should be universal. And I believe the way to support universal health care is through improved Medicare for all now. It will save money and it will save lives. Anybody who is arguing against that either doesn't care about one or the other. It is what should be done, and it should be done immediately. Also, we need to improve our infrastructure across the state. Whether you're rural or urban, you need access to those resources. We must improve broadband across the state. Everybody needs to have it, especially with the emergence of telehealth, and we need to provide the labor force necessary to save lives. We need more physicians. We need more counselors, psychologists, social workers. All of these things are important. And as someone who has produced physicians and scientists, and again, we need to invest in science because those are where the cures and vaccines lie. As somebody who's produced that, as your United States Senator, I promise I will save lives because my campaign has saved lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watkins. Dr. LaGrone.
Thank you, Sheila, for the question. As a pro-life Democrat, I believe that every life is sacred. All of us are born on purpose, for purpose, and with purpose. When you look at where we are in this country, the Democratic Party has yielded too much ground to the Republican Party when it comes to the issue of abortion. We sanitize it by calling it reproductive rights. Those of us who are in the church, those of us who hold a moral center in terms of abortion, want to hear the Democratic Party come in alignment with the common sense measures as most of us in the church believe in regarding to life. My stance is this: abortion should not be used as a form of birth control. It should only be considered when it is a case of medical necessity. When the pregnancy jeopardizes the mother, or in the case of rape or incest, and it should always be a medical discussion and not a political game. We need more supports for families, to incentivize families, our parents, to have children. Do you realize that in North Carolina, 64 counties in our state where deaths exceeded births? 64 counties in North Carolina had deaths exceed births. 35 of the 50 states had the white population lose during the last decade. We need to expand maternity leave for parents, affordable childcare, universal pre-K, and a universal minimum income similar to the advanced child tax credit to incentivize families to grow and thrive. We need to invest in rural hospitals and give student loan forgiveness for nurses, ambulance drivers, medical providers to work in rural environments. And we must stop governing to get elected and govern to help the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. LaGrone. And Senator Smith.
Thank you. Healthcare and policy is personal to me. I had my own experience with a broken healthcare system. Our economy is rigged. Our healthcare system is broken. There are folks who have access to health care, but yet they're having to ration their insulin to put food on the table. They're going bankrupt because somebody got sick. We don't need access to health care. We need health care. And that's why I'm fighting for Medicare for all. I'm not focused on what political pundits think that we can get done or say that we can get done if we do it incrementally. I'm focused on what people need and what people need right now. We visited every corner of this state, all 100 counties, and hands down the number one issue that is the same in the rural east, the rural west, and all the towns and cities in between, and even the urban centers. Healthcare is a problem. It's a basic human right, and we believe that we should fight for Medicare for all. As I look at the startling statistics in North Carolina has one of the worst Black women's mortality rates. In this country, some parts of this nation, it's worse than developing countries. When I look at the challenge for rural hospitals, we were out west talking to folks who were in the Mission Hospital service area, and this privatization and cuts in funding has made it hard for rural hospitals to keep their doors open. And certain parts of Western North Carolina, depending on where you live, it is closer for you to drive to Tennessee just to be able to deliver a baby. We need to have controls and prescription drug prices. We need to address veterans who have to drive long distances just to get to a
10
hospital.
seconds.
And so for me, as we talk about reproductive health care, Medicare for all, but for reproductive health care, we need to repeal the Hyde Amendment. We need to codify Roe v. Wade. Abortion is and always will be for the wealthy and well-connected, but this is an attack on the poor.
Thank you, Senator Smith. All right, we will now move on to our next question. Richard Chapman, who is an SEC delegate for the Harnett County Democratic Party, will be reading this question. He will provide the topic, he will provide the order of candidates, and he will read the whole question once and then put the question nugget in the chat as well as read it again. Richard, are you ready?
All set. Our next topic is civil rights and social justice. The order of response will start with Senator Smith, followed by Chief Justice Beasley, Senator Jackson, Mayor Newton, Dr. Watkins, and Dr. LaGrone. Over the last year, it seems that inequality and injustice have been exposed in a broader way for many Americans. These issues include criminal justice and police reform, economic justice, from wages to housing and poverty itself, racial and ethnic justice, including immigration and refugee crises, and many, many others. As you're all well aware, our nation and state remain divided on how to best address these injustices. Which issues would be your legislative priority? What can be done in Congress to address them? And how would your messaging pull the people of North Carolina together should you be our party's U.S. Senate nominee? To repeat that question, which issues would be your legislative priority? What can be done in Congress to address them? And how would your messaging pull the people of North Carolina together should you be our party's U.S. Senate nominee? First up, Senator Smith.
Thank you so much for the question, Richard. My top priorities, if it's not passed yet, and it's doubtful that it will be, that's why I just feel that we need to end the filibuster so we can deliver on a bold agenda. So for me, it will be passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That is an imperative. There are so many, particularly Black men and women, who have been shot down by the very people who are supposed to protect them. We have to end qualified immunity in the cases of excessive force, but we also need to ensure that we have a truly equal criminal justice system that doesn't have the disparate impacts for particularly minority communities and poor communities. We need to end mass incarceration. We need to put forth opportunities to pass, legalize and regulate marijuana, and then pass a Marijuana Justice Act. That would be a priority for me. And as well, because minorities, particularly African descendants of slavery, have been so disparately impacted by the criminal justice system in this country, coming from the policing and early opportunities to look at the ways that mass incarceration has decimated a community and kept them, constitutionally in the category of being slaves, those who have been in prison. I recently have celebrated some criminal justice reforms that I put in place. One was for incarcerated women, prohibiting and codifying the prohibition of the use of soft restraints on women who are pregnant and who are incarcerated. Also fighting for reproductive health care and sanitary products for women who are incarcerated.
10 seconds.
Last but not least, we need to make sure that we have a U.S. senator who understands the broken policies, the broken system, and who will fight dearly to make sure that we have those reforms that are necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Next up, Chief Justice Beasley.
This pandemic has just highlighted that there are so many issues around making sure people can take care of their families. There are a whole host of economic issues, and really all of these issues raised should be a priority. The reality is I support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It shouldn't be hard work to find good work. As I travel across the state, I hear from people who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet for their families, and it shouldn't be this way. We certainly know that we ought to have criminal justice reform. I certainly know that we have real disparities in criminal justice, and our systems really must be transparent, and everyone should be treated fairly and with dignity. And too often that's not the case, especially for people of color. As a judge, I certainly know how our laws can impact people disproportionately based on their race. And I've worked hard to make our systems more fair and transparent. There are critical reforms we really must make to our criminal justice system, and that includes legalizing cannabis and understanding that there are disproportionate impacts of low-level and non-violent drug crimes on people of color. We must also reduce incarceration to eliminate some mandatory minimums for non-violent crimes. And I absolutely would support the George Floyd Justice and Police Act to strengthen transparency and accountability in law enforcement. I know we need affordable housing. We certainly need to be concerned about people struggling and having a place to live. We know that EMS workers, educators with master's degrees, and firefighters all often are looking for affordable housing. And so we've got to make sure that we're taking care of folks. As Chief Justice, I stopped evictions by postponing hearings, understanding that people needed a place to live.
10 seconds.
So we need somebody who's going to take action and who has a proven track record of doing exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Beasley. Senator Jackson, you're up.
Thank you. Well, first, I want to say I agree with Justice Beasley with respect to support for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I think everyone on this panel is going to support that. I agree with her and everybody else who's spoken with respect to the legalization of cannabis. I think all or almost all of us are going to support that. The question specifically was, what's the first legislative priority with respect to racial equity generally? For me, it's ending gerrymandering. I think gerrymandering is the biggest racial equity issue. The reason the districts are drawn in such a crazy shape is often because what's happening is Black communities are being ring fenced. and they're being ring fenced for the purpose of minimizing their electoral power. And because that's the root of all of the other policy agenda that's being set, to me, it's the most important racial equity issue. The first bill I ever filed as a state senator 7 years ago was to end gerrymandering. And they sent that bill to the Ways and Means Committee, which hasn't met in 25 years. So you've never had a clearer example of a need for federal intervention on this. The second part of the question was about how are you going to pull people together? Why intend for this to be the most transparent campaign in the history of the state? Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because, frankly, I think it's the only way to win. I think it's the only way to pull people together is to show people that you're a real person, and to do that by going to their county multiple times and giving them a chance to come and talk to you. We've done that. We've learned a lot. Specifically, what we've learned with respect to racial equity is that what we need is a racial lens on every issue. You can't just have a neat, tidy racial equity agenda. You have to have a racial lens on voting, on healthcare, on criminal justice, on environmental justice, but also on housing. And specifically with housing, we've put out a pretty comprehensive plan, 10, 11 points. Just two I want to mention for you. One is zoning. That's a bigger problem in urban areas. Certainly in Mecklenburg, where I'm from, it's a major problem.
10 seconds.
A $15,000 first-time homebuyers tax credit. It would disproportionately help people of color and families of color. It would also really help young people who have on finding affordable housing. That's just one specific idea that would have a disproportionate impact in this area.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Jackson. Mayor Newton, you're on board.
Thank you. Melvin Davis and LaCurtis Reels went to jail for 8 years each over a $36,000 real estate transaction. That didn't happen 50 years ago. That happened within the last 10 years. Last summer, two amazing Black female leaders, Taisha Teal and Sharissa Elliott, led the Black Lives Matter in Beaufort. They had two very powerful and peaceful protests and two very powerful and peaceful virtual town halls. Hurricane Florence exposed the divide between the haves and the have-nots in Eastern North Carolina. And we know that there are hundreds of families in Eastern North Carolina that have not recovered from Hurricane Florence, and our churches and our nonprofits are doing gangbuster work to try to help people, but it's just not enough. So my priority would be to help our most vulnerable citizens. We see it. Hurricane Florence, we exposed it. Hurricane Dorian widened it. And then the pandemic has deepened that divide between the haves and the have-nots. And let's face it, if you have resources, you can recover very quickly. If you don't have resources, you are just trapped. So how do we help people? Well, we've talked about affordable health care. Certainly mental health capacity, substance abuse treatment is something that we need to help with. North Carolina is in the top 10 in food insecurity. How can it be that a wealthy state can't provide food for its citizens? And we talked a little bit about the $15 minimum wage. Beaufort was one of the first in the entire state to implement a $15 minimum wage for our town staff. And I will tell you, it works. It helps the local economy. It helps quality of life. It helps quality of job. So the $15 minimum wage works, but we must help our most vulnerable citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Watkins, you're on deck.
Thank you very much. This is a very important question. Equity, equality, critical race theory touches on a lot of these things. Having everyone have a seat at the table, we have an opportunity right here to make history. We have an opportunity to elect our first African-American senator. That is huge. That's not just trivial. If representation is to be fair in the positions of power in this country, then it needs to represent the entire country. And I think that is very important to understand. Also, I want to point out something that a lot of people might not talk about that often, and that's reparations. Reparations is critical because you have a population, the African-American population, descendant of slaves, where so many have reaped the rewards of their labor, unpaid for labor. In Asheville, they are implementing right now reparations. And what is the result? A business economy that is booming for everyone. Reparations doesn't just help African Americans. it helps all Americans, which is something that critical race theory preaches. Another thing that is very important, and every campaign should do this, I know at least mine is, we talk to everyone, every place, every walk of life. That has to be part of the campaign, and that has to be part of the legislation, because the American experience is a diverse, it's shared experience. But if you don't take the time to walk in others' shoes, you will go in the wrong direction. I believe in addressing medical and recreational marijuana by ending the federal prohibition of marijuana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Watkins. We appreciate that. Dr. LaGrone, you are on.
Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Elijah McClain. No society can herald itself as being civilized when the death of a fellow human being is accepted as common as the common cold. We act like we're not moved when African-American men are killed, gunned down by policemen who know they will not be held accountable. So we need to end qualified immunity. According to Pew Research, a person who's duly convicted by a jury of their peers spend 22 years on death row before they're executed. But an African-American, we fear every time we pulled over by the police that our lives could end within 22 seconds of that encounter. And the person pulling the trigger would not be held accountable. So what we need to do two things. We need to develop a law enforcement behavioral health co-responder model by which when law enforcement is called out, that they will called out to behavioral health issues, that a behavioral health specialist will co-respond and help stabilize the situation, do conflict resolution, de-escalation, and get the person in crisis to appropriate behavioral health clinicians. And that's a program I helped write for the city of Greensboro. African Americans are 6.5 times more likely to be stopped while driving, 20 times more likely to be searched than whites, and 4 times more likely to be searched once stopped. And we must hold police accountable. I'm a licensed clinician and I answer to a board. That means that my board looks out for the public interest, but police unions look out for the policeman or the practitioner.
10 seconds.
So we need to hold policemen accountable and have a federalized license by which when they engage in malpractice, they have that right to practice withdrawn.
Thank you to all the candidates for those answers. Kevyn, back to you.
Thank you so much, Richard. All right. We are coming to the end of our question and answer section. This next question will be asked by Abia Saeed, who is the president of the Wake Teen Dems. This particular question is slightly different because it is open-ended and it has a 1-minute time for each of our candidates. Abia will read the question and she will reread the question. She will also let you know the order of speakers. Abia, over to you.
All right. Our final question is more open-ended. Each of you will have 1 minute for your response. The order for our final question will be as follows. Dr. LaGrone will go first, followed by Senator Smith, Chief Justice Beasley, Senator Jackson, and Mayor Newton. Dr. Watkins, you will be our last candidate to respond to this question. So far tonight, we've discussed a wide range of topics most important to those in our local parties. For our final question, we're going to give each of you an opportunity to discuss one additional topic we haven't yet addressed that is most important to you. Please keep your response limited to one topic only. And as a reminder, you'll all have an opportunity to share closing statements later. Once again, please keep your response limited to one topic only. And as a reminder, you'll all have an opportunity to share closing statements later. Please remember that you only have 1 minute for your response. Dr. LaGrone, you may begin.
Jesus Christ says, you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. In the Greek, that word is aletheia. That means statements without pretense, without spin, without conjecture. And I believe that we can win over left-leaning Republicans and middle-of-the-road independents who are undecided independents by simply telling them the truth. Our country is in trouble. What we saw on January the 6th was an insurrection by insecure, power-addicted, a subset of the white population, power-addicted white men who are fearful of the changing demographics of America. And the reality is that African Americans have been a litmus test for the broader spectrum of America. So what you allow to happen to your African Americans, brothers and sisters, sooner or later is coming to your door. We must come together, work together, and stand firm on the truth and principles of our democracy. Thank you.
Senator Smith, you may go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that. My computer was freezing up. A topic that we haven't discussed is why I was late coming in on this question. We need to talk about the enormous problems that we're having in this state with universal broadband. Universal broadband is not a luxury. It is a life-saving utility. So many of my students, I'm a public school educator, have been so for 17 years after being an engineer for 13 years. So many of my students were disenfranchised from learning because they don't have access to reliable broadband. 400,000 North Carolinians do not have access to reliable broadband. In a pandemic, if you did not have broadband, you couldn't order your groceries or supplies online. You had to drive a distance to get there. Broadband is important for telemedicine,
10 seconds.
for economic development. It's important for being able to work at home and promote jobs. And so we need to solve that problem and make broadband not a luxury. We need to make it a life-saving utility. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next up is Chief Justice Beasley.
You know, we've talked about a lot of really important issues tonight. We know we're in a pandemic and so many people are still greatly challenged around this pandemic. What we know for sure is that this election is so deeply important and we absolutely must win it. It is so important that we know that it is important to make sure that we are confident that there's somebody who can win this election. You all have been just so great to me over the last decade and a half that I've served as statewide elected official as a judge, and you've been there to help elect me. We need to win this seat. As we think about all the important issues and think about my record as Chief Justice, leading through a pandemic, leading through heightened racial tensions as after George Floyd's death and murder, we must get this right.
10 seconds.
It's imperative that we make sure that we have someone who can win this race, and I am confident that I am this person with your help and support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is Senator Jackson.
Y'all, it's water and sewer. It's water and sewer. So we just did all these town halls. Whenever we would have a small town mayor come and join us for a town hall, if someone wanted to talk about housing, or someone wanted to talk about economic development, or just the broad range of opportunities that don't exist in a lot of these counties that do exist in others, the small town mayor would always say, hey, y'all, this is about water and sewer. So people would say, we want more affordable rental options. And the mayor would say, hey, we can't put a 60-unit apartment complex on septic or on well. We still have a ton of counties where they just don't have water and sewer. Senator Smith was right with respect to broadband. This is about subsurface infrastructure. The new infrastructure bill is good. Folks, doesn't have nearly enough money in it for water and sewer. And in 75 counties across the state, those are major, major issues. We don't talk about them enough as a party.
10 seconds.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much. All right, and next is Mayor Newton.
So let's talk about heroes. Throughout this pandemic, throughout the storms, throughout the other challenges, it's become crystal clear that our first responders are acting heroically very frequently. I won't say daily, but very frequently. And throughout the pandemic, now our medical professionals also have really worked extraordinarily hard, and you start to see a lot of burnout now as well. And our schools, my wife is a high school teacher, and we have conversations throughout the pandemic that we should no longer consider schools as just educational facilities. They are they're part of the infrastructure, and we should treat them as infrastructure. And then our Boys and Girls Club, our churches are on the leading edge of identifying the needs of students and their families. Let's think about these heroes and support them. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And lastly, Dr. Watkins.
Thank you very much. I think one of the things that we need to focus on is we need to bring everyone to the table. We need to expand the electorate. We need to expand the base. That is actually the only way that we're going to win in the general election. We have to bring everybody to the table. On our campaign trail, we have met people on their turf, on their time, on their terms. And time in and time out, they tell me, a 36-year-old Black virologist, that you're the first candidate for US Senate that I've ever met. That right there indicates to me that I'm doing the right thing. That right there indicates to me that we are not bringing everyone to the table and we're not practicing true democracy. I think that's important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Now back to Kevyn.
Thank you so much, Abia. That was wonderful. All right. We are going to take a little bit of time to transition to closing statements. We want to let our candidates regroup a little bit before they give us their final remarks. Again, thank you to these candidates for sharing their time and their plans with us. And thanks to all of you who attended. We hope that you have found this program edifying. Thank you as well to the 24 volunteers who made this evening's event happen. You all out in the audience need to know that your county Democratic parties are all volunteer organizations. We don't get funding from the state party. We don't get funding from the Democratic National Committee. And today's forum was not free for us to provide. So the best thing you can do to prepare for 2022, other than, learn about your candidates, is to support your local Democratic parties with your time, your talent, and your treasure. We're going to ensure that we get folks in leadership who care about humanity, who care about the environment. It is literally our job. And $5 from 100 people makes a big difference. Trust me. So please invest in your local parties, even if you are not a registered Democrat. If you are interested in getting folks in leadership who care about humanity and environment, you're interested in pushing progressive policy, you need to start at home. So at this point, we will hear closing remarks from these amazing candidates. Each candidate will be provided 2 minutes to make their remarks with a 10-second warning as the time is coming to a close. The order will be as follows. Mayor Newton, you started us off with question 1. You get the privilege of going last. So here is the order. Dr. Watkins, Dr. LaGrone, Senator Smith, Chief Justice Beasley, Senator Jackson, and Mayor Newton. And following these remarks, we will hear a short final farewell from Sharon Castleberry of Johnston County. All right, Dr. Watkins, I'm rolling to you.
Thank you very much for everyone who has been on this call and for everyone who will tune in. We are at a very critical point in our nation's history, an unprecedented moment. We find ourselves in the midst of a pandemic. In just under 2 years, we have lost around 700,000 people. This pandemic, if we don't get it under control, will just get worse. When we've traveled from the coastal plains to the mountains, people find out that there is a virologist running for the United States Senate. And without exception, our conversations evolve into a conversation about the vaccine, about the pandemic, about the virus. And also without exception, someone always leaves and says, you know what? I'm going to get vaccinated now. Or somebody says, I had a family member who didn't want to get vaccinated, but now they talk to you and now they're going to get vaccinated. I do not take this responsibility lightly. The times we find ourselves in and the identity that I have as a virologist and a scientist means that my campaign has the responsibility of saving lives. And we are very proud to have done that, but we have a long way to go. We need leadership. For unprecedented times, we need unprecedented leadership. We have a climate crisis, we have pandemics that will continue to go, and we have a fight for voting rights. We need to bring everybody to the table. And the only way you can bring new people to the table is to give them something new to believe in. They're not going to believe in the same old thing, but we have an opportunity to build the great American future. I'm Dr. Richard Watkins, your candidate for United States Senate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watkins. Next up, we will listen to Dr. LaGrone give his final remarks. Dr. LaGrone, as a reminder, you have 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Who in Washington, D.C. is advocating for us? How do we find a centering balance in a new world of automated technology, artificial intelligence, quantum science, supercomputers, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, DoorDash, and Instacart? How do we enjoy the remarkable technological advancements of our George Jetson world while saving our country in democracy from those with a Fred Flintstone mentality? This election is really not about what it means to be Democrat or Republican. It is about what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be humane? What does it mean to live as a civilized society? North Carolina Democrats, you have a choice. We could go with the quote unquote acceptable candidate who's going to keep the status quo and always kicking the can down the road. Or you can go with a servant leader like Dr. Tobias LaGrone, who's going to look Ted Budd in the Trumpians face to face and proverbially punch them in the mouth and be just as radical and progressive for Democratic issues as Trump and the Trumpians are for the insane Republican issues. In conclusion, Halifax County Judge Walter Clark coined our state motto, esse quam vadere, to be rather than to seem. What I say today, North Carolina, let us go forward. Let us not just seem, but let us be. Let us be forward thinking. Let us be innovative. Let us be visionary. Let us be courageous. Let us be kind to one another. Let us be bridge building. Let us be tempered in our conversations, tolerant with our neighbors. Let us be intelligent in our planning, innovative in our job creation, and let us be all for progress. Let us be all for progress and progress for all. ncnewday.com. You can find out more about me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. LaGrone. Next, we will hear closing remarks from Senator Smith. And Senator Smith, you have 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Sponsoring organizations for allowing us to share with you this evening. As we traveled to every county in North Carolina, we met a lot of folks who look different than one another, different ages, different races, different genders, folks who grew up and live on opposite sides of the state and probably don't agree on every issue. But from Macon to Manio, from Denton to Durham to down by, from Buncombe to down by my friend Rett Newton in Beaufort County, so many of these people are fighting the same fight. Fighting against a rigged economy, fighting against a broken healthcare system, fighting a racist criminal justice system, and a climate crisis. Fighting against a government that does not see them and representatives who do not serve them. At the heart of my campaign is the idea that you deserve more. You deserve a government that works for you, not just the wealthy, not just the well-connected. I grew up working on my family farm on the same land that my ancestors were enslaved on not that long ago. I've watched as my families fought to hold on to that land, to hold on to the farm. I've battled bankruptcy, I've battled workplace harassment, unequal pay. I understand why people feel frustrated, why things seem so dark, but I believe in this state. I believe in us, and I know that together we can flip North Carolina blue in 2022 and create a North Carolina that works for all of us. If you do too, if you want an America that sees you, if you want an America that invests in you, if you want an America that works for you, well, you can't even spell America without Erica. Please text JOIN to 51550, text JOIN to 51550. I'm Erica.
10
For us
seconds.
is my website. I'm one of us for all of us, one of us who will fight for us. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Senator Smith. Next, we will listen to Chief Justice Beasley share her final remarks. Chief Justice, you have 2 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to all the Durham, Wake, Johnston, and Harney County Democrats. It's been great to talk with so many friends this evening, and I'm so glad that you all joined us to hear us out, because we know that we have a real opportunity next November to change our state. We must elect a Democrat to the Senate who will fight every day for the people of this state. And you all know not only how important this election is, but how much work it takes, because you all do the work. I'm running for the Senate for the same reason I became a public defender right out of law school and became a judge: the pursuit of justice and fairness. Justice, fairness, and a stubborn, relentless refusal to see it abandoned. For far too long, our Republican senators have left North Carolinians behind, and the Senate is in a real crisis of justice. I've seen firsthand how the laws made in Washington impact and at times fail people right here in North Carolina. I'm the only tested candidate in this race, the only one who has won 2 statewide elections, and the only candidate who has run a full branch of government. From taking on the school to prison pipeline, to creating a family leave policy to help working families, to leading our courts during a pandemic, I have spent my life in the pursuit of justice. I am running for the Senate because we need more leaders who will understand the laws and policies that impact real lives and impact the lives of our children and their futures. As a mom, for me, this is about making life better for the next generation. I want voters to know that we can bring change to North Carolina by electing someone who has the record and commitment to build a better future for our state. And that's what I'll do for North Carolina as
10
your next
seconds.
Senator. Appreciate your support. Please go to cheribeasley.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice. Next, we will hear from Senator Jackson. Senator Jackson, you have 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And let me just start by saying this is probably the single most efficiently run candidate forum I have ever been a part of. And I think I speak for all of us in commending you for just the obvious amount of work that went into this. Well done. And it's deeply appreciated by all of us. Thank you for keeping this so well run. I just want to be candid with all of you. We should be honest with each other and acknowledge what a challenge winning this election is going to be. It's a midterm. Our party is in power. Trump won the state. No one should expect a blue wave. We should expect the pendulum to swing back. We should assume that whoever ends up being the nominee is going to be a slight underdog in this, and that winning is going to be an extraordinary challenge that's going to take an extraordinary effort. And so the question I would be asking if I were a voter in this primary is, who's putting forth an extraordinary effort? Well, for our campaign, we've held over 120 town halls, more than one in every single county. We've contacted almost 500,000 voters directly. I've personally met with 10,000 voters so far. We have 4,000 volunteers. This is all a year before the election. That's an extraordinary effort. I intend for this to be, as I told you, the most transparent campaign in the history of the state. This is also going to be the most substantive U.S. Senate campaign in the country. We've already put out detailed position papers with respect to housing, LGBTQ issues, veterans issues, universal broadband, and hourly workers agenda. There's a lot more to come. These aren't talking points. These are detailed positions. I think that's really important. I also want to mention, as of this week, we started our college tour. Now that we're done going to every single county, now it's time to get young people excited about voting in a
10
midterm. So
seconds.
now at Thanksgiving break, we're going to be going to over a dozen schools across the state. Y'all, we can win this thing, but it's going to take an extraordinary effort. See you on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson. And last but not least, we will welcome Mayor Rett Newton to share his final remarks. Mayor Newton, you have 2 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate it. And my greatest thanks to Durham County, Wake County, Harnett County, Johnston County for pulling this together. I'm not a fearmonger by trade, but our nation is in crisis right now. We must protect our democracy. We need to roll back our dependence on fossil fuels. We must protect our environment, and we've got to work to get ourselves out of this pandemic that, again, should have been done last year at this time. Had there been any national leadership whatsoever, we would be done. Outside of that, those are kind of the collective problems, but now let's think about a little bit more individual problems. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but we just absolutely must support our most vulnerable citizens. That's with affordable health care, that's with food, it's with, in some cases, reliable transportation. There's not a cookie cutter solution for helping all of these families, but we do need to have a menu of options for people. Certainly, as we travel across the state, we hear a lot about mental health capacity. We hear a lot about substance abuse treatment. That is the story of the day, is we have to help these most vulnerable citizens that are trapped in this divide between the haves and the have-nots. And again, if you've got resources, this is not a problem for you. It's the people that don't have the resources to bridge this gap. So I really appreciate, again, the 4 counties that are part of this this evening. Let's use that for a template as we pull all 100 counties together. And I'm not forgetting about my challenge to the other candidates this evening. Let's get Medicaid expansion across the line. Let's work as 6 candidates, working with 100 counties, working with district chairs, working with our Republican, the moderate Republicans that can work with us. It's ready. We need to get Medicaid expansion over the goal line, because this, again, it affects over 500,000 North Carolinians, billions of dollars in jobs, or billions of dollars in economic development, and thousands of jobs. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Mayor Newton. We are coming to the close of this evening's event. I am now going to roll to Sharon Castleberry, the chair of Johnston County Democratic Party, for a final farewell. Sharon.
Thank you, Kevin. We are incredibly privileged to have such commitment and care for our state and country in every candidate that we've heard from tonight. We thank them again and their campaigns, as well as the event sponsors, for giving us this opportunity to hear from each of you. I need to set the record straight on something, though, that a few weeks ago, Kevin and the Wake County Democratic Party leadership reached out to the county party leaders along their borders to see if we wanted to join them in co-hosting tonight's event. With much of the technical and organizational work of this forum already taken care of, they generously turned their idea into a happening that became ours. On behalf of the Democratic Party of Durham County, Harnett County, and Johnston County, we extend our gratitude to the Wake County Democrats for their care, their talent, and their commitment, not just to those in their county, but to our entire county party family. As we close out this evening, to all who are listening in, please remember to vote if your town is having a municipal election this October or November, and wherever you may be sitting tonight. As Kevin said earlier, please consider investing in your local Democratic Party and party affiliated organizations with your time, talent, and those treasured dollars, because as Congresswoman Ross led off with, we are in this together, and together we will elect more Democrats. Please stay safe, take good care, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Volunteers, find the link to the roll call pre-meeting that was on our management document. We'll see you on the other side. Good night.